Hi there, welcome to Lilly-Tree. Today we're going to relax with this fun freestyle wire-wrapped ring. And even if a ring isn't your thing, stay tuned because the techniques are easily adaptable to make a pendant, earrings or bracelet. Now let's get wire wrapping. This is a great project to relax with and let the wire randomly create shapes. I'm also using a variety of steps, so you can pick which to do and which to leave out to make the design your own. To make this, you need 1mm diameter wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge, and a selection of small beads. Mine are 3 and 4mm diameter. And the tools we'll be using are a twister tool or wire twisting pliers, a hammer and block, ring mandrel, nylon jaw pliers, round nose pliers, chain or flat nose pliers, wire cutting pliers, and an awl. We're going to start by making the ring shank, and I've got 90 centimetres of the 1mm wire here, which is about 36 inches. I'm going to fold it in half. The ring shank's going to be made by the centre part of this wire, and I want to twist about 15 centimetres with just 6 inches. Now I'm going to use the wire twisting pliers for this. So I'm going to twist the wire together just a little higher than that 6-inch point. And I'm just twisting enough to fix it together. And then I'm going to bend the excess wire over, so I can fit that into the space that's in those pliers. This is the easiest way to get the wire into these pliers. And just to stop the excess whipping around as we make the twist, I'm just going to bend that in next to the pliers. And I'm going to use my gizmo as an anchor point. So I'll put one of the gizmo mandrels through that loop and then use my wire twisting pliers. You don't have to use a gizmo to anchor the wire, but you need to make sure whatever you use, it creates a small loop at the end of the twist. And I don't want the twist to be too tight, so I'll stop there. Now we can open those pliers and take the wire out. And I just want to straighten those ends back out again. So I'll undo where I twisted them together. And I'll just straighten them a little right now. I'll come back to those later. So now I'm going to hammer the bit of wire that's going to be the ring shank. And that'll be a couple of inches of the wire, or 5 or 6 centimetres. You don't need to be too precise with the measurement. I'm just going to gently hammer that wire along. It's the texture that I'm looking for here, but I want to keep it soft enough to be able to make the shape of the ring. If the wire is too hard after hammering, you could anneal it. Just use your torch to heat it up until it starts glowing. You'll know it's too hard if it won't bend into shape easily. I'm just being a bit lazy here and trying not to introduce an extra step. And now let's straighten up those wires, and I'm just going to use my nylon jaw pliers for this and pull them along that wire until it's fairly straight. If there are a few kinks left, don't worry, you can hide that in the design. Then we need to thread those wire ends through the loop we created by twisting the wire. Just going to thread them gently through and move that loop down the wires over the first part of the twist and try to get a fairly decent round shape. And then we can place the wire on our ring mandrel and continue pulling until we've got a round ring shank. I find it easier to start a few sizes larger than the ring you want, and then move that loop further up to reduce the size down. You can use the hammer at this point as well, just to round that off a little bit more. And once the shank's the size we want, we're just going to bend back the rest of the wire. That'll hold the shank to the size. And then we're ready to start shaping the design. Now we're just going to start bending that wire into some loops. I want to make these first loops fairly large so they reach the edge of the design, so you can still see some of the twisted wire in the design. Now I've made the loops that I want. I'm just going to check it back on the mandrel to see what kind of shape I've got there. And you can just adjust it until you're happy. And I just want this to curve around a little bit. Now I'm going to hammer those twisted loops to match in with the ring shank. Now actually, as I've started doing this, I'm kind of regretting it a little bit. It is quite difficult to get to, but if you've got a small hammer like this riveting hammer, it makes it a little bit easier. Or you could just skip hammering this section of the twist. And then I'm going to continue making loops with that wire. And for the time being, I'm going to keep those two wires together, I think. Now the aim is to make these loops about the size of the beads that we're using, so that they can nestle in later on. But try to keep the curves you're making fairly large. You can always fill in areas later on if necessary. And then to hold the design together, every so often, we can just thread those wires through the other loops. Just gently pull those wires through. And pulling each wire through separately might make things a bit easier. There really isn't any system to this, just keep making shapes to fill the space to a size and shape that you like. And then threading the wire through periodically to keep everything solid. You can use your pliers to help feed the wire through and adjust the loops if you want to. Now I think I'm going to make some of the loops with just one wire. And I'm just doing the same thing, making curves and loops and threading the wire through to keep the shape solid. Now I think I'm quite happy with the design that I've got there. Just going to bend it down a little at the edges, just so I've got a bit of a curved shape. So then I just need to finish off the ends. I'm going to trim the end of that wire and then use my round nose pliers to create a small curve on the end and hook it around. So it's nestled in the design. Now my other wire's coming through on the back at the moment, so I'm going to feed it through up to the top of the ring, and that's just to make sure the cut end doesn't end up catching on your finger. It's getting quite tight in there, so I need to pull it through carefully. And then I'll create another loop, trim off the end, and make sure that end is hooked and kind of fed down into the design. We just want to make sure it won't catch when we're wearing the ring. And we have the base of our design. So we're now ready to add the beads. And to do that, we're going to use some of the 0.4mm wire. I've got about 1 metre of it here. which is around 40 inches. I'm going to find the centre and then thread it through the design that we've made on the ring. And I'm just going to thread it back and forth to wind it around one of the base wires 2 or 3 times, just to anchor it in place. And I'm doing that in the centre of that 0.4mm wire, so I've got both ends to work with. Once we're happy that that wire is anchored on quite solidly, we can bring that wire up to the top of the design, over to where we want one of the beads to sit, and then we can thread on our first bead. I'm using one of the larger beads here, it's a labradorite. I think it'll sit okay there. So we can just thread that wire back down. And then across to the next space where we want to add a bead. And we'll just keep taking the wire up, threading a bead on, and then taking it back down through the design to fix these beads in position. And I'm just deciding as I go which beads I want to sit where. I'm trying to make sure I haven't got the same beads sitting next to each other, and I'll have around the same number of beads of each type on there, just so that one doesn't overwhelm the design. Now I've got 4 different types of beads here. I've got labradorite, red agate, a green coated pyrite, and some copper beads. But you can have even more types of beads there, or just stick to one. Or maybe different sizes and shapes in the same colour. This is where you can really change the effect with the different beads that you use. And just keep working around the design, adding the beads that you want, and use both ends of the wire if you can. I'm trying to keep the ends of those wires a similar length for the next stage. Now I'm quite happy that I've got the beads on there that I want, so I just want to feed both of those wires through to the back of the ring. And I want them fairly close to each other. That bead's not quite sitting right, so I'll just adjust it. And make sure that's in place. Now if you like the look of the ring at this stage, you could just leave it at that and finish these wires off. But I'm going to use them for a final bit of embellishment. Now this final embellishment just adds an extra layer and just helps seat some of those beads in if they're sticking out quite a lot. So first I'm going to twist those wire ends together, and I'm going to use the twister tool for this. So making sure your wires are of the same length, I'm just going to feed them through 2 holes of that twister tool. Fold the wires back and twist them back on themselves so they're nice and secure. And then I might as well use my gizmo again, and I'm putting the mandrel through the ring. So I'm just keeping a bit of tension on those wires and rotating the tool to twist them together. And I'm going to twist these quite tightly together. So I'll just keep rotating till I'm happy. If you've got someone to help, you could have them hold the ring, but just make sure they keep their fingers out of the way of these wires that are twisting. And then take those wires off the tool. Now I can thread that twisted wire through to the front of the ring. And I'm going to take it around one of the beads. The trick here is to keep a bit of tension on that twisted wire as you're taking it around the beads. And I think I'll take it back round the one next to it. and then thread it back down through the design. And then up again near the next bead. Be careful that the wire doesn't kink. Because it's twisted, it gets a bit work hardened, a bit more difficult to work with, so you've got to treat it a little bit more gently. And I'll just take the wire around one of the stones there and back down again. And I'll just keep going around the design, wrapping that twisted wire around the beads. And I'll only wrap 1 or 2 beads before I take the wire back down through the design to anchor it all in place. Otherwise there is a bit of danger of it slipping off. And you could wrap around as many or as few beads as you want to. Once I've finished wrapping around the beads, I'm just going to take that twisted wire around one of the base wires 2 or 3 times. Trim it off. And just make sure the ends of the wire are within the design so they're not going to catch. And the ring's finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.